on their victims. Are these murders random, or are the victims specifically targeted? Why are Jeffrey Dahmer's victims homosexual or minority? Why did Ted Bundy kill dark-haired women only? Why did John Wayne Gacy and Larry Eiler kill who they killed? And how do you know that you aren't the type that a serial killer targets next? This is Common Ground, and I'm Monroe Anderson. Stay tuned.
This station proudly salutes the men and women of the United States Marine Corps and supports their courageous families.
I grew up in the nation's capital. I was the middle kid. My dad was a sports writer, so I loved baseball. In fact, I was the bat boy for the Washington Senators when I was 9 years old. At 16, I was a journalist. At 23, I got married. Had two wonderful kids. Unfortunately, that ended in divorce later on. I've hosted talk shows. I've anchored newscasts. I got hired in Chicago. I got fired in L.A. Connie and I started dating. We put off marriage for years. In 1984, she calls me up, and all of a sudden she says, "Maury, guess what?" I said, "What?" She says, "We can get married now." I said, "We can? Why?" She says, "Because I found a dress."
Beginning September 9th, Maury Povich will bring the experiences of a lifetime to 1 hour of television every weekday.
I'm as happy as I've ever been in my life. I'm 52 years old, I'm in love, and I'm stepping up to the plate again.
The Maury Povich Show premieres September 9th.
One of the hardest things with dyslexia is you have so much inside you and you have so much you want to share. And especially when a teacher, someone you're supposed to look up to and someone who's supposed to help you express yourself, just gives up on you. They didn't understand that it was just I reversed letters. It's not that, it's your whole life. You live with it constantly. There's no magic pill or godfather that will just zap you and it's gone away. It's just something you really have to work at and not give up.
Welcome back to our show. It has been argued that all murders are senseless, but a case can be made that some murders are more senseless than others. Most murders, you see, are crimes of passion or personal affairs with one acquaintance killing another. And then there are the serial killings, when a victim becomes a victim because of how they look or what group they belong to. Why is this? Is there anything we can do about it? Joining us to discuss serial killers, their bizarre behavior, and their hapless victims is John Henry Damsky, a columnist for the Windy City Times, who has been covering the Dahmer case and who reported on the Eiler and Gacy cases. Returning from last week's show is Dr. Helen Morrison, a psychiatrist who specializes in psychotic behavior. Welcome back. You know, I was wondering, why does it seem that the last three celebrated serial killer cases, Dahmer, Eiler, Gacy, all seem to have homosexuals as the targeted victims?
Well, there are 2 points that I'd like to make about that. One is that not all of the victims were considered gay or homosexual. There were a lot of children. There were people in the community.
Okay, in which cases now are we talking about?
We're talking about Gacy and Dahmer.
Okay.
Where an adolescent boy whose mom had dropped him off at a drugstore, in Gacy's case, the boy disappeared. And he had been offered a job by John Gacy to do the construction work and was gone. But I think that a point that had been made last week was that if a killer, if a serial murderer chooses a type or a look or a victim, he's going to choose someone that it's not going to be easily missed. or that society might judge is not a person to be missed.
And I think we get gays, not homosexuals, but gays, people in gay bars, are picked on because we lack proper protection and service of the law. For instance, in the Dahmer case, the morning after they arrested him, they went to his chocolate factory and arrested an openly gay man who worked the first shift. Dahmer worked the third shift. This fellow worked the first shift. They went back to this fellow's apartment, met his lover. They've been lovers for 15 years. They took their videos. There were 5 policemen and 2 detectives. They took their videos. They took their phone books. They took a lot of their records and then took them down to the station in lockup and said, you must know Dahmer because you're gay and you work with him. He didn't know Dahmer at all. He didn't even know that Dahmer was gay or homosexual.
So they just lumped them together.
They lumped them together, and that's, in our community, we tend to get enforcement instead of law. And that's what frightens us, because for no reason at all, we can be hauled in like convicted felons just because we're gay. And that means we're in no man's land when it comes to protection and service. And then below, like the subculture below, which tended to be more of Dahmer's victims, because Dahmer had an interesting habit. When he went to a gay bar, he almost talked to no one. He never socialized, and he told a couple of priests or ministers that he didn't like homosexuals. Or another famous expression would be, I'm not gay myself.
Yeah, but you find Jewish people hating Jewish people or blacks hating blacks. That's not uncommon, right?
That's not uncommon, but he's not gay, and he really had no gay identity and hadn't grown up. He preferred then to leave the bar and just find people walking the streets.
Okay, wait a minute, John. To say he's not gay, but he's having homosexual relationships with living and dead bodies.
I know, but that's the...
I'm missing something.
Yeah, well,
somebody's going to have to explain.
You're not missing as much as he was missing. Actually, he has. I think Dr.
Yeah,
Morrison
perhaps
will.
the Dr. Morrison is going to have to explain this one to me.
Well, one of the things that we discovered in the cases even prior to John Gacy was it was much easier to label the serial murderer as a, quote, abnormal, aberrant individual than to pay greater attention to the fact that these individuals do not even make it to a cohesive sexual identity. They're not gay, they're not straight. They don't prefer one person over another person. Something in them becomes so incredibly impaired within the first year of life before a sexual identity gets formed that they pick a victim.
And you would refer to some genetic deficiency that
what we've seen is all of the killers have been male. We've also seen that once you spend a lot of time looking at their internal state and how they functioned in the external world, is that we see them having severe impairments psychologically that lead them to be like a puzzle that's not quite put together yet. They're bits and pieces. On the surface, they look like a psychopath, and yet internally or inside in their psychology, which is a terrible word to throw around, they are not a full person. They really never form a personality.
When you say they're not a full person for people who may not have had Psych 101 in college or something like that, could you maybe break that down a little more?
Most people you can label. You can say that you're a passive person or an active person or a psychopathic person or a sociopathic person. These individuals never form a complete personality on the basis of how their psychology is put together.
So they don't have a personality?
They don't have one. They're bits and pieces floating around, basically.
So this is why a Dahmer could seem like such a clean-cut, all-American boy when he wanted to put on that face and then could be this hideous monster at other times?
He's always the hideous monster. It just depends on what triggers the emergence of that hideous monster. That monster is always there. But people never seem to look beyond the surface. They always see them as nice, helpful people. They see themselves as that. They try to project that image. And so when they walk into a bar or they walk into a grocery store or a drugstore and they choose their victim, it's a little bit like falling in love. You look across the room, and out of thousands of people, you choose this one person.
That's love at first sight, huh?
Death at first sight.
Incredible. Now, you've studied a number of serial killers.
38 of them.
38?
Yes.
Who are some of the more celebrated ones that you've
Well, I think the
spent time
Ripper
with?
case in England in the 70s was the most accessible of the cases around the world. But John Gacy, Richard Masick, who was here in Chicago, was known as the Mad Biter. Ted Bundy, Wayne Williams. I was the first person to say that my suspicion was that Wayne Williams was black, for which I was really vilified, actually.
And how'd you make that determination on Wayne Williams?
His pattern of his victims. They were young boys. It would be very, very difficult for an individual who was not black in the area to not be seen and noticed.
Okay.
It's common sense.
Exactly, of course.
But I think part of the problem is people get an idea of how someone should be. A serial murderer needs to be this monster, and they're not. They're the everyday person next door, which makes it even more frightening.
Okay, now going back to these victims, why is it that you have young girls or homosexual, gay men or blacks? I mean, why are these groups? I mean, how does this happen this way? Again, is
Well, part of it is, I mean, black gays are perhaps one of the most vulnerable young black gays in our society. Because in being raised, they're so afraid of claiming that they are gay that they will go under all kinds of ruses. I did one story of a guy, all his family works for the CTA. They're all black, and they let him go as a drug dealer. He pretended to be a drug dealer, and he would go to gay bars. He's even gone to jail. And he was 29 years old, and he saw me with my hat. He recognized who I was. I was the first person he'd ever told that he was gay, that he ever felt that he could do this. And he was running from that knowledge. And his folks, his church even, and his environment understood the fact that he was a drug dealer. But they would not want him to come out and be gay. And many of these kids who wanted to be princes.
Okay, well, what about with Ted Bundy and
in those
the women?
Vulnerable positions?
The serial murderer has a type that they choose. If you take the photographs of any victim of any serial murderer, within that serial murderer, the victims are all very similar. They look alike. You would think that some of them were related. And so why they pick this type, no one knows. But they manage to find something that's very concretely the same. They look alike.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss why they pick, who they pick, if we can, and also we're going to talk about why Dr. Morrison got interested in this subject to begin with.
For my birthday, I asked for a pair of lavender pumps.
Purple shoes.
What does she give me?
A U.S. savings bond.
It was so embarrassing.
This is the thanks I get for giving her something that will keep on earning interest long after those pumps have gone out of style.
But then I talked to Elaine.
Elaine's mom gave her a savings bond, too.
She said in a few years we can use these bonds for lots of stuff, like a down payment on a house, even a car.
I've always liked Elaine.
So from now on, all I want are savings bonds. Think of all the shoes we'll be able to buy.
I grew up in the nation's capital. I was the middle kid. My dad was a sports writer, so I loved baseball. In fact, I was the bat boy for the Washington Senators when I was 9 years old. At 16, I was a journalist. At 23, I got married. I had 2 wonderful kids. Unfortunately, that ended in divorce later on. I've hosted talk shows. I've anchored newscasts. I got hired in Chicago. I got fired in L.A. Connie and I started dating. We put off marriage for years. In 1984, she calls me up, and all of a sudden she says, Maury, guess what? I said, what? She says, we can get married now. I said, we can? Why? She says, because I found a dress.
Beginning September 9th, Maury Povich will bring the experiences of a lifetime to 1 hour of television every weekday.
I'm as happy as I've ever been in my life. I'm 52 years old. I'm in love, and I'm stepping up to the plate again.
The Maury Povich Show premieres September 9th.
In 1939, Lou Gehrig was unstoppable, until ALS. Like thousands of others afflicted with Lou Gehrig's disease, his body slowly died, while his mind remained intact. We're still searching for a cure, and now you can help. Give your used CDs, records, tapes, videos, electronic equipment, and musical instruments to the ALS Mammoth Music Mart. Call now, 708-674-MART. Your help is our only hope to strike out Lou Gehrig's disease.
We're back talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, serial killers, and their victims. How are the victims selected? I mean, how do these guys get stuck on these one groove? You know, okay, with Ted Bundy, I want dark-haired women. I want dark-haired women. And then you get somebody else who has a completely different interest.
Nobody knows what it is about the victim that the serial murderer chooses, but it's very well known that the serial murderer sees a victim, and it's a victim. Out of 1,000 people, they choose this one person. Why? We don't know why. I mean, that's part of the study of the pattern, is why is it that they pick a certain kind of person? And the second part of that is, why is it that someone who's in a bar or somewhere else chooses to go with someone?
Okay, well, I mean, our viewers out there, should they be worried about becoming a victim? I mean, if I'm a 45-year-old white male, am I in danger of becoming a victim? Or
not
if I'm a 50-year-old housewife,
if you're
white housewife?
a teenage black who, particularly gay, because, and even 23-year-olds, because there's very little instruction by parents or school in how to date when you're a gay man and who to go out with. And often the 23-year-old will be behaving almost like a 14-year-old.
But Dr. Morrison is telling me that they, in this selection process, they may or may not be thinking, well, this person is easy to get to. It's almost death at first sight or whatever, and it has.
Well, it's a death dance. I mean, you have to have a victim, you have to have a perpetrator. And, you know, you wonder, what is it about a person who will be in a singles bar or a gay bar or any kind of a bar and will still go with someone? What is it about a person who lives in a home where bodies are buried that they can live in that home for 2 years, admit to having the smell, admit to knowing what's going on, and still live there and never think? Why open your door to a stranger? You know, there are so many circumstances where people don't think about what they're doing. They just do it.
And then the trap comes too soon, as in the Dahmer case where he used rum and coke, and you're drugged before you know it.
Right.
And I've noticed another pattern with some of these. The killers, they have worked either in a morgue, a mortuary, a military medic. They have had experience in anatomy. We might have a lot of people with tendencies to be killers, but they're not killers because they don't have the physical knowledge. That's another component to the package, that they actually know how to do what they're doing.
You know, I was wondering, now, Dr. Morrison, you're telling me that these killers are born, they have this gene. Are victims born also, or made? I mean, are there some people who are prone to be a victim more than others? I mean, just
well, I think
too trusting, too whatever?
I think there are people who are victims. They, you know, always the people who are falling down, always the people who are getting bilked with something. They tend to be people, I guess victims could be too strong a word for it, but they certainly seem to fall in the category of being taken advantage of.
But beyond that, there isn't just the psychological perspective of a victim and an individual. There's a society that we're living in, and there's a political and social problem in the fact that racism and homophobia play an integral part in these people being singled out as marginal and not listened to, and women aren't listened to, and the women that tried to complain to the police weren't listened to because they were women. And it means that the whole process of the rumor of a Dahmer or killings in the mainstream press wasn't reported, but we were hearing it, and we heard it on the streets for 4 months. We've been saying, and there have been mysterious bodies appearing on, not mysterious, there are bodies on Wrightwood and different in Uptown, and they haven't been putting it together. And often when gays go to police, they're not listened to, and they're not taken seriously, just as the women in Milwaukee weren't taken seriously.
So what you're telling me, you believe, is that if 10 white male successful business executives showed up dead, bodies dead in a 6-week period, then police
or
would
one
be
white
all
woman
over
in the suburbs. We know that would cause a Brock scandal, and the press would be on it, and people would pay attention. They do not pay attention, and often in these families, the parents don't give a report of a missing person. They're lost from the get-go. And that's a problem. And now I see that Milwaukee, the mayor had an assembly the other day of 500 people came, and he didn't even use the word gay and lesbian in his speech. The police force in Milwaukee under Breyer has been 20 years behind. They're almost Stalinist in their approach. It's a very sad situation. And I think that they're in no way in touch with the communities, and they've just appointed a board, and they're having a professor from Marquette, the university there, and as the people say, well, get some nitty-gritty people on. Get some real black citizens, people that live in the community, gays, lesbians, have some people that know what's going on. And it seems that we get enforcement instead of law, but we get like mob enforcement, but the responsibility goes back to the mayors and the politicians who really aren't up to speed, even in our own city. The police board in Martin, just 3 weeks ago, he's appointed a lesbian and gay advisory council, but I mean, they're about 20 years too late. It's just baby steps that they are beginning, and there's only one open lesbian police officer in our city who came out. No gay men, and I know there are many gay cops because I know them, and through the years, and they're at all levels. It's just forbidden to say these things.
But I'm sure I have people out there watching and saying, so what? Why should gays be on the police board or anywhere else?
I mean, because we're citizens with equal protection and justice under the law like everyone else, and we raise families, are part of families. I gave you the black experience of the boy who had to pretend to be a drug dealer, but the more common experience of black gays is that it's interesting. They come out both slower and faster than white gays. And when we had our parade this year, the clubhouse, the Black Gay Bar, sponsored at the Rocks in the northern white section of Chicago, they sponsored a picnic. And it was a family picnic and church-like, and all black gays and lesbians from the Midwest came there, about 5,000. And the only reason you would know that it was a lesbian and gay group is that the girls were playing ball and the boys were jumping rope. Outside of that, because their family was there, their ex-wife could be there, would their new lover be there? And for blacks to come out, especially in Chicago, they want to, it's a family affair.
Okay,
and,
John. John, what I'd like to do is, because I brought this up, segue into how Dr. Morrison got into the study of serial killers. We're running out of time.
Well, actually, in the early 70s, I was involved in having met some special agents of the FBI who decided that they were going to surprise me by showing me some very indelicate photographs of dead bodies. And I was very interested in it. We were using hypnosis for use in victims. And I said, well, if you ever find the person who did this crime, call me. And they did. And I was able to sit down and start working with my first serial murderer. I spent 600 hours with him on a one-to-one basis in a prison setting or outside of a prison setting, in a jail setting, and began the study. Now, since that time, obviously with the 38 or 39 murders that we've had, we can see a lot of similarities. We can also see differences. But the stories are legion about how a serial murderer functions when you're sitting down with them and talking with them, or actually they're talking with you.
Right, well, but 45 seconds left. Why this fascination for you? I mean, how
I have never seen such an incredibly complex human being who has all of the bits and pieces of being able to be a human being, of reaching his potential, but never being able to put it together.
Incredible. And how does your husband, who's also a doctor, take all this? It's 20 seconds.
Well, my husband is extremely understanding and tolerant. I think he's been wonderful. I know a lot of my friends cannot tolerate what I do.
Got it. Well, I want to thank you, and we'll be back in a moment.
Where do we find the words to thank those who were ready to sacrifice it all for our country? One way is to let them know the country they were protecting is protecting them too. Hello, I'm Secretary of Labor Lynn Martin. We're protecting the jobs our reservists and National Guard members left behind. If they work for you, you should know about the Veterans Reemployment Rights Law. Call us at 1-800-442-2VET. They did their job, now let's do ours.
I grew up in the nation's capital. I was the middle kid. My dad was a sports writer, so I loved baseball. In fact, I was the bat boy for the Washington Senators when I was 9 years old. At 16, I was a journalist. At 23, I got married. Had 2 wonderful kids. Unfortunately, that ended in divorce later on. I've hosted talk shows. I've anchored newscasts. I got hired in Chicago. I got fired in L.A. Connie and I started dating. We put off marriage for years. In 1984, she calls me up, and all of a sudden she says, Maury, guess what? I said, what? She says, we can get married now. I said, we can? Why? She says, because I found a dress.
Beginning September 9th, Maury Povich will bring the experiences of a lifetime to 1 hour of television every weekday.
I'm as happy as I've ever been in my life. I'm 52 years old, I'm in love, and I'm stepping up to the plate again.
The Maury Povich Show premieres September 9th.
Triumphs and tragedies, truth and lies, marriage and divorce. Experience them all as the Museum of Broadcast Communications presents A Summer of Soaps, June 21st through September 15th. Relive all of the great moments from your favorite soaps of today, television soaps from the past, and classic radio serials. Meet the stars of today's most popular daytime dramas and the people who create them. A Summer of Soaps at the Museum of Broadcast Communications. For more information, call 987-1500.
That's it for this week's Common Ground. Once again, I'd like to thank my guests for joining me and you for watching. I'm Monroe Anderson, asking that you take care. I'll see you next week, same time, same place, on Channel 2.